Hello and welcome to the session. The classical method of learning any language is to first learn its basics. Learning programming language is no different. So before we write programs in C language, we must first learn the basic building blocks of the language. In this session, we will discuss in detail about the constants, different forms of constants, which form one of the basic building block of C programming language. A constant is a quantity whose value do not change, and this quantity can be stored in computer's memory location. Now, the constants can be basically divided into two broad categories. One is numeric constants and character constants. The classification is based actually on the kind of data that we use. What kind of data do we use? We either use numbers or we use alphabets. So based on this, the constants are divided into numeric constants and character constants. Now, when I say numeric constants, the kind of numbers that we use are either positive number or a negative number or a fractional number. So numeric constants here are basically divided into two categories, which are integer constants, where we can use the positive number or positive value or a negative value, or real constants where we use fractional value. Now also we have character constants, which are not only alphabets, but we also can use alphabets, digits or special symbols. Now this is divided again into single character constants, where we can use either a number or a digit or a special symbol, or we can have string of characters which form string constants. Firstly, decimal integer is such integer constant whose combination lies between 0 through 9. So any number which has a combination of 0 through 9 digits is considered to be a decimal integer constant. First and foremost rule of any integer constant is that it must have at least one digit. It can be either a positive integer constant or a negative integer constant. If it is a positive integer constant, like shown in the example plus 54, it is preceded by a positive sign. Any negative integer constant is preceded by a negative sign. You can also have any number which is not preceded either by a positive sign or a negative sign. But in case any number is not preceded by a positive sign or a negative sign, is considered to be a positive integer constant by default. So such kind of numbers are called as decimal integers, which form within the combination of 0 through 9 digits. Octal integers are those integer constants which are formed within the combination of 0 through 7 digits. To differentiate a decimal integer constant and an octal integer constant, we represent an octal number with a leading 0. Now for example, 34 here can be a decimal number because it forms within the combination of 0 through 9 digits, or it can also be an octal integer because it is formed within the combination of 0 through 7 digits. So to differentiate it as an octal integer constant or an octal number, we represent it with a leading 0. So now 034 is an octal integer constant. It is not a decimal number. If it is a decimal integer constant, then we do not precede the number with 0. A hexadecimal integer constant is preceded by 0 small x or 0 capital X as shown in the example. A hexadecimal number is a combination of 16 different symbols. Now the first 10 symbols in a hexadecimal number is represented by 0 to 9 digits. The next 5 symbols in hexadecimal number system are represented by A to F. That is 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 in hexadecimal numbers are represented by A, B, C, D, E, F respectively. For example, 12 in decimal is represented as C in hexadecimal. The next variation of numeric constants is real constants, which is otherwise called as floating point constants, which comes in two forms. One is fractional form, other is exponential form. The rules that are observed while forming a fractional real constant is that it must at least have one digit. It must have a decimal point. If you observe in the example, all the numbers that are represented here have a decimal point. The real constant can either be positive or it can be negative. The default sign of the real constant is positive. That is, any number which is not preceded either with positive sign or with negative sign is considered to be a positive number. Uh, and also there must be no comma or no blank space within the real constant. You can have a decimal point, but you cannot have a comma or a blank space within the real constant. We also have an exponential form of representation of real constants. This form is generally used when the real constants are either too small or too large. In exponential representation, the real constant is represented in two parts. One is mantissa part, which is appeared before the letter E. Now this letter E can either be small or can be large. The other part is exponent part, which is followed by the letter E. To represent a real constant in exponential form, the mantissa and exponent must be separated by the letter E, and the mantissa part can either be positive or can be negative. The default sign of mantissa part is positive. The exponent part must have at least one digit. Again, the digit after in the exponent part can either be positive or can be negative. The default sign of exponent part is also positive. There must be no commas or blank spaces within the real constants here, and we have to see to it that the mantissa part and the exponent part must and should be separated by either small letter e or capital letter E. Now in the example that we see here, 68 followed by 8 zeros can be represented in an exponential form as 68E8 representing 8 zeros. 68 is the mantissa part, or you can also express it as 6.8E9, 6.8 being mantissa and 9 being exponent part. Character constants are of two types. One is single character constants, other is string character constants. In single character constants, a constant can be a single alphabet, or it can be a single digit, or it can be a special symbol, which are enclosed within single inverted commas or single quotes as we call. The maximum length of the character that we can have within this single quote is only 1. That's the length of the character that we can have. The characters cannot be followed by even a blank space or by even a comma, because even comma and a blank space is also considered as a character. String character constants are sequence of characters which are enclosed within double quotation marks or double inverted commas. Now the characters here may be string of letters or numbers or special characters or combination of any of these. You can also have multiple blank spaces within the double quotation marks, which forms a string. And also we have to note that the letter A, which is in the single quotation mark, which is a character, is different from the letter A, which is in double quotation marks, which is a string. So you can have even a single character which is enclosed within the double quotation marks, which forms a string. These are some of the backslash character constants that we use basically to format the output onto a output console. These are called as backslash characters because the characters here are followed by the backslash. And if we observe that these backslash character constants are considered to be single character constants, and that's the reason why they are represented within the single quotes. Now each of the backslash character constant here has a definite meaning attached to it, and among these new line character or the tab character constants are the ones which we use within the printf statement. Now /n, which is called as a new line character, instructs the control to jump to the new line if used within the printf statement, and also if printf statement uses /t, it instructs the control to take one tab space. We also commonly use this backslash followed by backslash for using single comment lines, and we also use null character in the concept of strings. Thank you, as we have reached the end of